Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk. We're joined again by friend of the program, Ryan Wilson. He does NFL draft for CBS Sports. You can check him out, cbssports.com, CBS Sports HQ, everything else over there at CBS. Ryan, it's good to talk to you, my friend. How is draft season treating you 2024?
Good. We saw each other at the combine. It feels like it was yesterday. The thing is scooting right along. I think we have 25-ish days or so till the actual draft. And before you know it, it'll be summertime, and we'll be looking at exit 2025, which is bonkers. But yeah, so far, so good. So far, so good.
It's such a long process that, people like you who do this even more so than I do. But, I started summer scouting last year in, June and July to try to get ahead a little bit. What are some of the things over the course of this process that have really surprised you about this class that if we had this conversation back in September, you wouldn't have expected?
Well, in September, we were talking about Shedeur Sanders being potentially one of the first quarterbacks drafted, which is sort of funny. In September, there were all those Ohio State kids that were coming out. They were talking about the Denzel Burks, Travion Henderson, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, even. They all returned to school. We weren't talking about J.J. McCarthy on a national stage.
Or really Jaden Daniels quite yet, right?
Or really Jaden Daniels, exactly. One of the guys that I was looking forward to watching from summer was Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback. He got injured, transferred to Notre Dame. My guy Spencer Rattler, who I have a soft spot for, ended up having a pretty good season under some trying circumstances. But if he had balled out 2 or 3 years ago, he was the presumed first quarterback drafted, and Caleb Williams happened to him in Oklahoma. So, yeah, certainly a lot has changed. Amarius Mims, we had an idea of who he was based on his one playoff game after the 2022 season, but what would he look like had he had a full season under his belt? He didn't get that full season under his belt. So there were a lot of let's say curveballs, but like Byron Murphy is another guy out of Texas. We weren't talking a lot about over the summer. We're talking about Johnny Newton, of course. Braden Fisk is a great story. Western Michigan transfer, went to Florida State, had a great season, balled out of the Senior Bowl. He's probably going to be a top 70 pick. The defensive tackle out of Florida State there. Quinyon Mitchell, I mean, the list goes on and on. I won't just read down the list of names of guys that I was surprised to see, in addition to the guys that we sort of had an idea who they were going to be this time of year.
Yeah, and look, I think that's what's really turned this into such a good draft class, right? You have had guys that we knew about for a long time, the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, that, Dallas Turner, these guys at the top. We expected to be here, Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt to an extent, though I think he made a lot of progress this year too.
Yeah.
Jumped into that top 10 area. But then you have these guys that have emerged, and I think, Ryan, for me, I think you have more, true, what I call blue chip, top 10 picks in any draft, top 5 picks in many drafts in this class than maybe the last 2 or 3 put together. I think that's how strong this top 10 is.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a few weeks now. It feels like, and sometimes this time of year, you'll hear people say on social media that so-and-so evaluator only has 22 first-round grades. I feel like you can get 40, 45, 50 players deep into this class, so you're going to get guys who can help you immediately and be impact-type players just because it's so deep. And, of course, it's deep at wide receiver because we've talked about that to death, but it's deep at offensive line. There's some edge rush dudes. There's some cornerbacks. Tight end class has some guys that a lot of folks probably haven't heard of, just because outside of Brock Bowers, there's not a lot going on. Jatavian Sanders is a name, but I think Ben Sennett's an example of a tight end out of Kansas State who has a chance to be really, really good. And, of course, the quarterbacks. We could see 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. If 6 win, I'd be surprised. But I think between Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, and maybe even Jordan Travis, you see those guys go late day 2, early day 3, and have a run on those guys. Because I saw a clip on Twitter over the weekend. I don't know whether it's XFL or UFL was playing. I can't remember. But Matt Corral threw a touchdown pass. He was my favorite quarterback in that class, and that class was straight up terrible at the quarterback position. Mac Jones is somewhere else. Malik Willis is hanging on for dear life. And no, that's a different class. So it's that's the Kenny Pickett class. So Kenny Pickett somewhere else. Malik Willis is hanging on for dear life. Desmond Ritter's been benched for Kirk Cousins. And then you have Matt Corral, who, as a 3rd-round pick, got released by Carolina, and now he's the only guy throwing touchdown passes because he's the only guy currently playing.
Yeah,
But the point is that it's so
I
hard to
think
tell.
UFL, right? I think UFL, United Football League, it's called now, maybe.
Maybe. I saw the highlight on clip on Twitter. I was happy for him, and I moved on. I didn't read the details. Yeah.
Hey, look, and I think that shows the difficulty with evaluating quarterbacks. We're gonna have Steven
Oh,
Ruiz on later on in the week, and we're gonna dive into that deep. But you were at two big quarterback pro days last week, Ryan. So why don't we, kind of talk about the quarterback position that way? You were at UNC pro day, you were at the LSU pro day. Obviously, LSU has more than just Jaden Daniels there. What did you pick up from those pro days? How much do you take out of them from watching the guys, and then maybe more importantly, talking to a lot of the evaluators that were there?
yeah. Ahead of the Jane Daniels Pro Day, which is on Wednesday, UNC's was on Thursday the next day. Uh, the conversation I was talking to Scott that the word he used when describing Jane Daniels was he can demoralize defenses. So if you're looking for a quarterback and you're a defensive coordinator, which quarterback don't you want to face? Jane Daniels feels like he's pretty high on the list, assuming Caleb Williams is the first quarterback taken, because we know that if you shut down Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. somehow, it's incredibly difficult to do. But let's say you shut them down, and then Jaden rips off a 40, 50-yard run, and you're in a worse situation than you were before the snap. And that's what Jaden Daniels brings to the table. The ball popped out of his hand. He was 6'3.5", 210, and he looked to be like exactly like what he saw when he was during the season in terms of how thick he was. Can he add weight? Probably. Does he need to? I don't know. I mean, he seemed thick enough for me. The comp for him is Lamar. Lamar certainly weighs more now. But the throws he made, they looked like the throws he saw on tape. He struggled a little bit with consistency on the deep ball. But again, I'm not going to put too much in a shorts and t-shirt workout when you watch him play in the fall and he's just crushing it. So I get that. And some folks, social media folks, not even anybody that I talk to, the concern was that, okay, he struggles with the deep ball. It's like, well, okay, maybe here in this situation, but I would encourage you to go watch any 2023 play and tell me if he struggles with the deep ball.
Yeah, I mean, my God, there are slot fades down the field all over.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
featuring Brian Thomas Jr. typically
deep all over the place, and anyone that says that has not watched him play football.
Right. So that's why you have to take it with a grain of salt when you're on social media. So the next day we go to, and the other thing, this is interesting. So we go to Chapel Hill the next day to watch Drake May. Drake May has Tez Walker working out as well, the long, fast wide receiver. He's a little stiff in terms of his route running on the short and intermediate routes, but he can run past you all day long. His hands are certainly not what Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr.'s hands are, and he struggled with that at the Senior Bowl, and we saw that. But Drake May, he's 6'4", 227, gained 4 pounds since the combine. The first thing I noticed is that he looks like he's 12 years old in the face. Like and I mean, he has nothing to do with that. It's just crazy how young these guys look. But once he got the ball in his hands, he looks smooth. And again, his workout was a little more tailored than Jaden Daniels was. They did the typical 60 throws from his own 40, and they did some red zone stuff where he threw some fades and on the run, and his deep ball looked to be a little bit better in terms of the accuracy. But again, you go back and watch Drake during the season, and there's some plays where you go, oh my God, this guy's a top 5 pick. And there's some plays where you go, is he blind? Like literally, does he have trouble seeing? Because the decisions he makes are question you, give you pause. But again, Jaden's played 5+ years. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. played 5+ years. And Drake May replaced Sam Howell 2 years ago. So you have to understand that he is going to get better as well. And he looks the part athletically, arm strength. There's no concern about that. His arm is probably a tinge better than Jaden's on the deep balls. They both have some zip on the intermediate throws. The other thing that I heard a couple of scouts talking about as we were just watching the workout is that during Drake's workout, about halfway through, he took him a little bit to get warmed up. He missed some easy throws early. Again, I don't care. But one of the comments I heard from a scout was this place is incredibly tense right now. And one of the things that I didn't think so at the time, but one of the things that brought my attention to it was another scout said, yeah, this turned some music on. The LSU workout had music on and it felt a lot looser. And it felt like you were in a library at the Chapel Hill workout.
Interesting. I
don't think Drake was at all tight or concerned about not performing well, but it was something that I made a note of just because someone brought it up. And little things like that. But I thought both players had great workouts. I thought the receivers, Malik and Brian Thomas Jr., and even Tez Walker to a degree, looked the part as big, strong, physical receivers. There's a difference between Malik and Brian Thomas Jr. and then Tez Walker in terms of the smoothness in the hands. But physically, they all check the boxes. And of course, Malik had the 4.35 unofficial 40 and the 42-inch vertical, which is something to behold.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Yeah, that's not bad. Walker, I was happy caught the ball better, but he
did.
He had a rough week in Mobile, and he was just fighting himself all week. I'm happy he caught the ball better. Last on the quarterbacks, Ryan, real quick. What's your sense here? I think we all have to be careful as to what we're believing at this time of year. We've seen it in years past. Oh, Malik Willis is going to be a top 10 pick. Will Levis is going to be the first pick off the board. I mean, you go back, and the way quarterbacks kind of move around the board for people that follow this in April, not necessarily for people that, do this at a level that you do, or NFL evaluators, obviously. Where are you right now in terms of how you think these quarterbacks are going to go off in this draft? And I guess, in the context of the Giants picking 6, will they have to move up if they want to get one of the top 4 guys, let alone the top 3 guys?
Oh, yeah. Right. So Caleb's going first, and I've been saying that since the fall. And there were some conversations in the fall, even with people that I trust, that said Drake could go first. So, like, all right, well, based on what, I don't know, but we'll see. The NFL sees things differently than the media. But Caleb's going first unless something crazy happens. And then the question becomes, is it Jaden or is it Drake? And I do the podcast with Rick Spielman, the former Vikings general manager, and he and I both were at these pro days. And after the LSU pro day, he said, Jaden's my quarterback 2 for now. And 24 hours later, he goes, yeah, I think Drake might have snuck back in. He was always a Drake guy. Right, exactly. He was a Drake guy all season and throughout the draft process. I was a Jaden guy. I was not skeptical of Drake, but I was willing to acknowledge that he had some flaws. Not that he can't overcome them, but I was like, all right, let's see what happens. And the other thing that I always say is that I was too hard on Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon because I saw the way he played his final year at Oregon. It didn't make sense to me. But sometimes it's not the player; it's the system that he's in.
You're right. I'm sorry for interrupting, but you're right. People forget that Justin Herbert's last year at Oregon the tape was not great. It was not.
Yeah, and my mistake at the time was like, okay, well, he can't do it. And here's the thing: when you're 6'6" and 230 and can throw the ball through a brick wall from 40 yards away,
right,
and you have the demeanor that he has, you can absolutely do it. It turns out that offense, they weren't asking him to do the things that he needed to do. So I have to guard against that when I try to come down on these quarterbacks, whether it's Drake May or JJ McCarthy or whomever, and just understand that you put someone in the right system. Like, I guarantee you Drake May and Kyle Shanahan's system is going to be a lot better than what we saw at UNC. So those are the caveats you have to keep in mind. So for me, I think if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, the new offense coordinator at Washington, and I have experience with Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams is not there, Jaden Daniels feels like the next best thing. And if I'm head coach Dan Quinn, who we know came from Dallas, where he was defensive coordinator and has to sort of prepare for these mobile quarterbacks, I would much rather not face Jaden than Drake or JJ right now. So my hunch is that I would have Jaden Daniels going to the Washington. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's where I'm at on that. If you're the Patriots, we've seen reports they would trade down, and Spielman said this last year about the Texans. You cannot come out of this draft if you're the Patriots without a quarterback. You can make all the Jacoby Brissett jokes you want, but at the end of the day, he's a short-term solution. He's not a long-term solution. So whether it's Drake May or J.J. McCarthy or even Michael Penix Jr., I don't care. You have to draft a quarterback. So that's three for three. We'll assume that that's Drake May there. And then the question becomes, if you're the Giants at 6, Cardinals and Chargers, obviously not, but there's going to be the push from the Vikings feel like the front runner to move up, but also right behind them, the Broncos at 12 and then the Raiders at 13. So that's the concern. And then the question, I'm sure you guys have had this conversation, are the Giants going to move up to 4?
Because that's what it would take. I agree.
Are you on that train, or you would rather just sit pat and see what comes to you?
I mean, look, to me, I'm not as high on McCarthy as other people are, to be totally honest with you. I see him. And look, if you're picking 15 or 16, okay, because it's the opportunity to draft of Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze or something like that, right? It's that either or situation, and I want to pick a guy that I think has true top 8 upside in this league that has that Justin Herbert type of skill set you were talking about, right? That size, that arm strength, that sort of thing. And I just don't see that level of tools with McCarthy, which A, picking him over one of those top wide receivers, and then B, having to trade up and lose more draft capital to do it. I'm having a hard time selling myself on that proposition, to be honest with you.
And I get it. And when we do these mock drafts on the podcast, and I've had the Vikings coming up from 11 to 4 or 5 or whatever it is. And Spielman's point is this. Okay, so Caleb, Drake, and Jaden only cost the teams that drafted them a first-round pick, and that's it. So you're going to take the 4th quarterback and then mortgage 2 first-round picks, which is what the Vikings now have, and the 2025 first-round pick to get the number 4 quarterback on a hope and a prayer. And, hope ain't a plan, as the old saying goes there. That's the real concern, right? And how many times first of all, quarterbacks in the first round work out, I think 50% of the time. I haven't done the math, but I think that's what typically
that's about right.
Yeah. So how often does the quarterback taken 4th, the quarterback taken 4th in the draft class, how often does he work out? I mean, I would imagine it's substantially less than 50%. I could be wrong, but just anecdotally, the math would seem to suggest that maybe it doesn't work out quite as often. So that's the concern. And I'm of the opinion, I'm with you on J.J. McCarthy. Here's the thing. When I talk to NFL teams, to a fault, they love J.J. McCarthy. And I went back. So we watched a ton of his games during the season because we talked about it on the podcast. I went back a month or so ago and watched all of J.J.'s throws on 3rd and 6 to 10.
They're
yards.
good.
They are insane.
They're very good. I know. I did the same thing.
They are big boy throws, and they're not check downs. These are big boy, intermediate, and deep throws. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He got sacked a few times, but it's 3rd and long, so I get it. But the other thing is this, and that rearranged my thinking about JJ. The other thing is when we sat down and talked with him at the combine, I was like, okay, this is a weird thing that people say, but it's something that the first thing popped in my head. This is a guy. If you have a daughter, that's who you want your daughter to marry.
He's Captain America. I mean, you listen to him at the podium. He's basically Captain America.
Captain America. That's a great way to put it. He's incredibly engaging, charismatic. We had to do some stupid social thing for CBS, like the social aspect of stuff that we do that I'm not involved in. But like, hey, as long as we have JJ, he was up for it. Side note, Brock Bowers was absolutely not up for it. And so I was in the awkward position of having to ask him stupid questions solely for social. But JJ was all in on that. And I talked to a team that needs a quarterback in this draft, and they said JJ was the best on the board when they had all these quarterbacks in the combine too. So he's not an idiot. So all those things you fall in love with. That said, and I ask scouts all the time when I talk to them, why are we not having this conversation about Michael Penix if all we talk about is tape as being important? And what's the downside to Michael Penix again? And you get all this hemming and hawing and like, well, he's not throwing well over the middle of the field. I checked. He's okay over the middle of the field. It's interesting. He's good from like 0 to 7 yards past line of scrimmage. There's a gap from 7 to 15, and then 15 to 40. He's amazing. So he's got to work on the intermediate over the field throws. But that's the other thing. If you're the Giants and you desperately want a quarterback, I would think more about trading down for Michael Penix than I would for trading up for JJ. They're not going to do that. But the long answer is I would sit there and take the best wide receiver. If you guys are off the offensive line train, which according to Giants fans on social media, they're very angry about the prospect of, especially after free agency, of going in the offensive line position.
I mean, I would never be angry about picking a guy you can be an all-pro offensive tackle. My guess is that they're leaning wide receiver. I don't know that for sure, but I think just based on what the roster looks like, I think it makes sense. But look, I'm with you. And again, this doesn't mean I don't think J.J. McCarthy is going to be a good NFL quarterback. I think he will, but it's just a matter of, figuring out what the best move is in terms of picking at 6, which is interesting. Giants Huddle Podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. You mentioned the LSU Pro Day, Brian Thomas Jr. We haven't talked about him much on this show yet. Do you think he is definitely going to be the 4th wide receiver off the board? And I think there's a rawness factor there. Talking to scouts when you're at that Pro Day, what do they have to say about Brian Thomas Jr.?
They're very impressed by Jr. Hold on. I forgot to turn my phone off. I'm an old person. I apologize.
No, you're good.
The comp that Spielman has for him is a really good comp because sometimes it's hard to think about someone who's 6'3" and 210 or whatever he is. He runs a 4.33. It's George Pickens. Like, if you like George Pickens at his best, that's Brian Thomas Jr. And he's still, you talked about those inside fade touchdowns that Jaden Daniels, typically those were going to Brian Thomas Jr. And he was, Randy Moss and whoever the poor SEC defensive back was in front of him. And That's the other thing. He's playing in the SEC. He's not playing Division III football and just destroying kids that are going to be accountants one day. He's destroying guys that are going to be playing in the league. I like him. I'm right now as my wide receiver 4. I have him like a mid first round grade on him, if that's what you want to call it. I have Marvin, Malik, and Adunze pretty clustered together. It's top 10 picks, and then Brian Thomas in the middle of the first round. But would I take him at 6? Probably not. But if you love him, you love him. And the other thing is this. So you got Jalen Hyatt, who I like coming out, but he's 1-year guy and sort of developmental. I think that's fair to say. You have Wandale, who's undersized, who came back nicely from the ACL. You have Darius Slayton. And then after that, it's pretty wide open. And there's no Brian Thomas Jr. type on the roster except for Darren Waller, who might retire. If we're talking about size down the middle of the field, we don't know what Darren's future is going to be. So if that's what you're looking for, like I think it makes more sense for a Brian Thomas Jr. in New York for the Giants than to add him literally to the Steelers where you have 2 George Pickens. I like that, but there's you'd rather have maybe a different flavor. This is going to sound crazy to say. I might rather have Ladd McConkey and George Pickens than George Pickens and Brian Thomas Jr.
Better fit, I think, with Pickens. I agree with you. You want to have 2 different types of wide receivers on that roster. When you're doing all these mock drafts, Ryan, and obviously you can go check out on CBSSports.com all the mock drafts. What picks are you having the most trouble figuring out, and what teams are you having the most trouble deciding what they're going to do early in this draft?
So 12 and 13, because assuming the Vikings straight up at 11, right? And they're going to get a quarterback and sell the farm. I don't know what the plan B can't be Sam Darnold. Maybe they stay put and play with Sam Darnold. Maybe it works. Because Kevin O'Connell is a great coach in terms of coaching up these quarterbacks. Maybe it works. But as a Giants fan, you've seen Sam Darnold probably closer than you've wanted to. Just tangentially being the Jets playing in the same building, and it's not been pretty there. Wasn't necessarily great in the limited time he got in San Francisco over the last season. But what does Denver do at 12, and then what does Las Vegas do at 13? Because if you're out of quarterbacks, Sean Payton is not a big rookie quarterback guy. I was reading something in The Athletic where he was grilling Bo Nix in their meeting, and one of the questions he asked Bo Nix was what size shoe you wear. Bo said 12, and Sean said, well, you look more like a 13. It's like, well, that's a weird thing to say. I don't know what you get out of that other than being, like a jerk, but okay. Like you try to figure out who these players are. I don't know if asking them shoe sizes is the way to go, but my point is that Sean seems to prefer veteran quarterbacks not named Russ. He's rarely started. I don't think he's ever started a rookie and not done it for a while. So you have that at 12, and then at 13, what's Antonio Pierce going to do? Antonio Pierce was the only Raider I saw at the LSU Pro Day, but he was there front and center watching. And maybe he was watching the receivers. Maybe Devontae Adams, he's 29, 30. So maybe you're trying to add a weapon for whoever the quarterback ends up being there. But you would have to imagine that he's looking at Jaden. The next day, I don't know if he was at the Michael Penix Pro Day, which was the 24 hours later. So those are the biggest questions for me. And look, Denver could take a cornerback and absolutely smash it. Las Vegas could do the same. They could take an edge rusher. They could take Byron Murphy there along the interior defensive line, and that would be a great pick. But if you don't have a quarterback, you're not winning this league. So those 2 picks are the ones that I struggle with the most, just because if you're not trading up and Minnesota beats you to the punch, you're on QB5 already after 10 picks.
Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 Best Bank in the U.S. by The Banker as the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle. Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. A few more minutes here with Ryan Wilson from CBS. Check out, again, all the work he does covering the draft. Really wonderful stuff that Ryan does covering the draft all year long. Ryan, who are maybe some of the guys in this class? They don't have to be first rounders. They could be day 3 guys, day 2 guys that you think the league should be higher on, that you maybe like a little bit more than the consensus?
All right, you know what I'm going to do? We do this this time of year on the podcast. We do 7-round mock drafts for every individual team. So I'm going to tell you, my buddy Emery Hunt, who I work with, who
Yeah, I know Emery well.
He did the Giants draft with me. So here's the 6 overall Jaden Daniels slips. You're taking Jaden Daniels if he's there at 6, correct?
Oh, okay, I like that.
So at 47. How are you on Peyton Wilson, linebacker out of NC State?
I'm not a doctor, but I can play. I can play one in
2
real life.
2 ACLs and 2 shoulders.
Because I think he is first in the first round tape. So if the doctors clear him, I think he's a heck of a player. I don't think there's much of a need at linebacker with Bobby Okereke, but in Shane Bowen's system, is he going to try to play 3 linebackers a little bit more? In which case, you do need a third one. So I think that's interesting. I think talent-wise, that is certainly a nice pick in round 2.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're not crazy, but no, that's good. I want to know this because Emery's supposed to be the Giants insider, and he's already got an F on the second round grade. All right, how about Jermaine Burton?
Jermaine Burton out of Alabama,
the big wide receiver at Alabama. He has some deep speed. Pick number 70, so you get him in round 3 there.
My understanding, there might be some off-field stuff with him.
Okay.
That I'm not sure how the Giants think about him, but as a player and a receiver, if you're getting the quarterback at 1, I think in terms of talent-wise, I don't think you're finding a much more talented wide receiver in the 3rd round. But I would think, generally speaking, if you want quarterback round 1, I would be very surprised if the wide receiver wasn't off the board in round 2.
Yeah,
but Burton's a good player. I like him in round 3.
And I'll just mention one last name here because I'm making a note here to fire Emery for next year's Giants draft. The YouTube commenters agree, it turns out.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
All right. One player that I do like a lot, and I want to hear what you think about this, is Texas Tech safety Dadrian Taylor Dimerson. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see him, but
I have not watched his tape yet. I've seen his testing, which has obviously been fantastic.
Had a great Shrine Bowl. He plays deep, but he can play close to the line of scrimmage. He plays with an edge, and I like him a lot. And I think that we're going to hear more about him. Maybe not in the weeks to the draft, but after he's drafted, and folks are like, all right, who's this guy? And when people go back and see him, and once we get into the practices and August rolls around, he's going to be one of those guys that I feel like is going to flash early. Is there a need there at safety for the Giants? Did Emery get that? Okay, thank you, Emery. There we go. We finally
got that right. No McKinney right now. Dane Belton is the presumptive starter next to Jason Pinnock, but he hasn't really, I don't think, shown a ton as a starter yet. So there's a need. The other need too, I'll throw at you, Ryan, is cornerback. Adoree Jackson's not back. We don't really know who the other 2 starters are across from Deonte Banks, Cordell Flott, maybe Nick McLeod, maybe. Do you have a day 2, day 3, corner that you really like that could be a fit? It could be inside or outside. I can see the Giants needing both, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and this is another one of Emery's guys out of Florida State. Let's see. I have a day 3 grade on him, and we had him going at pick 107. So early 4th, Renardo Green out of Florida State. I liked him. Emery liked him a lot. He liked him a little more. He's mostly outside. Played a few snaps in the slot, but 5'11", 186, ran a 4.49. But again, Florida State guy. I'm looking at his numbers real quick. 13 pass breakups, 3 touchdowns, gave up 1 interception this season. So Emery was high on him. I'm trying to read my notes. I have 400 guys I'm going through. When you
no, trust me, I get it, man. It's a lot.
It's a lot. What am I looking at here? Yeah. So anyway, he was the 4th round pick that Emery had. Emery was big on Renardo Green. Again, I liked him. I didn't love him as much as Emery did, but it's hard to tell. Like with the quarterbacks, you can like a guy, you can like their physical tools, and I like that with him. But sometimes it doesn't translate, and then you get coached up. And this is another thing that I was just talking to someone about this morning. The coaching in college, when you compare it to NFL coaching, can literally be night and day because in college, the goals are different. The goal is to win now because this coach is going to get fired. So you're trying to find athletes or guys who have a sense of sort of have a sense of what they're doing. And the footwork may not be there. The hand placement may not be there. All those things may not be exactly where they need to be when you're talking about dotting every I and crossing every T when you get to the NFL. And I think that's also the Justin Herbert conversation. Those are the things that I missed. Like, you have to understand that there's room for growth when you're talking about 20, 21, 22-year-olds. But Renardo Green was one of the guys that was a day 3 target that Emery liked. And I'll give you a guy that I like in day 3. We'll see if he's there in day 3. I like Ryan Watts out of Texas. He plays outside. Jarius Monroe out of Tulane. This is a guy I just watched recently. I was like, okay.
I like Monroe. I watched him at Frisco, and I went down there for the Shrine Bowl. I thought
nice.
And he even played some safety down there too in Frisco as well.
Yeah, and the thing you learn pretty quickly as you start going through these guys after the season is that there are a lot of dudes out there that didn't get talked up a lot because they didn't play on a good football team or they went to play for a smaller school. And you're like, oh, these guys can compete. Like, not everyone's going to be Quinyon Mitchell, but there's guys out there who have 75% of Quinyon Mitchell in terms of the school they played at and the way in which they play and how it translates. And Jarius Monroe was a pleasant surprise. And Daquan Hardy's one last guy I mentioned, slot guy out of Penn State. He's a little smaller, 5'9", but that guy plays with an edge. So there's some defensive backs that were a little. I had graded a little higher than Renardo Green, who we ended up taking in the Giants mock draft.
Final question here. I'm going to make it a multi-parter, so I'll cheat on it. A couple other Giant needs I'll throw at you. You can reference back to the mock if you like. Running back with Saquon Barkley, right? And then I think interior offensive and defensive line, guard and defensive tackle. If you want to attack guard, DT, and RB on our final question, guys you maybe either like guys in the mock draft, however you want to attack it, you could attack it as day 2 or day 3 picks.
Yeah, how high are you taking a Trey Benson in round 2?
No, I think
right?
I think round 3, more likely round 4, kind of right in the middle of that kind of running back run, you know?
Yeah, because I agree with you. Like I like Trey Benson a lot. I like Jonathan Brooks. I like Jalen Wright. I don't want to use a second round pick on the running backs at this point in the conversation. I love the idea of a Blake Corum in the 4th round. I'm a Blake Corum fan. I don't know if he's too undersized for what you're looking for, but I like he's like a mini Saquon in terms of the behind the line of scrimmage explosiveness and one cut and go. He's not gonna run a 4.2. I don't think did he run fast?
4.5.
Yeah, I thought he was a 4.5 guy.
Maybe
yeah.
4.51.
And that's fast enough, and we know he can catch out of the backfield. So I like that. Bucky Irvin out of Oregon. I like his game a lot. Again, day 3. Ray Davis has an injury history. He's a little older out of Kentucky, but again, great season.
I'll tell you what, I think you watch Davis's tape. I don't see much different between Davis on tape and Brooks and Benson, to be honest with you. I think they're very similar players, in my opinion.
The thing is, and I've said this for forever, my blind spot is slotting these running backs. Like I struggle, and I talked to scouts about how to get better at it. Like Zach Charbonnet, I didn't know. I was like, he looks like a day 3 pick to me. And I was talking to a scout that said he's going to the 2nd round, and he had a great season, like as sort of a backup compliment to Kenneth Walker to the 3rd. But I agree with you. It feels like you're looking at this guys and you're just talking about gradations when it comes to running backs, whereas you can see a wide receiver, you can see a quarterback, and you see those differences there. So I think Garindo, who ran the 4.2 at the I don't get it. He wasn't even the number 1 running back at Louisville. Had to leave Wisconsin, I believe, behind Braylon Allen. So
you would have no idea he was 220 pounds watching him run on tape. He just doesn't run with that type of force behind.
So it's a fun little combine storyline. But at the end of the day, I'm not drafting him high. And the other name I'll mention is Audric Estime. He ran the 4.7 and change. Came back and ran 4.58 at his pro day, I believe, in Notre Dame.
I liked his tape. His tape is good.
I did too.
He's shifty for a guy that's 225, man.
And you know who he reminded me of? Karen Williams, who ran a 4.7 something and change at the combine. He had a pretty good season last year for the Rams. So just keep that in mind if you're going to crush a kid for running a 4.7, which it ain't great. All right, defensive tackle, or do you want to go offensive line?
Whichever way you want to go.
All right, interior offensive line is that we decided on?
Yeah, guard specific.
Okay, number 1 is Christian Haynes out of UConn. Like if I don't know if you remember, but Jordan Jefferson, the LSU defensive tackle, took off Christian Haynes' helmet and chucked it.
They did. So, I remember that.
At the Senior Bowl.
I was right there.
We talked to Braden Fisk, the Florida State defensive tackle, who's on the field for that at the combine about it. He said, "I'll tell you this: Christian Haynes is one of the toughest dudes I've ever seen."
Wow, I like it.
And my coworker Elijah Doosbull was standing on the sidelines, and he heard Christian say to Jordan at the time, he said, "If you're afraid, go to church," because Christian was not back. Like Christian is a dog. He's going to get drafted the 2nd round, I feel like.
No, that was going to be my question. If the Giants want him, that's going to have to be their pick at 40,
that's right.
47, right? That's what I thought.
Yeah, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. Another guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder, and this will dovetail nicely into the defensive tackle conversation. Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State.
Loved him in Frisco. Oh my gosh, I love that kid. I could watch him play on tape all day. He finishes people. He's tough. Yes. He's blue collar. Love everything about him.
He's an animal in the best sense of the word. And I mentioned the defensive tackle there because one of the defensive tackles I liked who didn't get a combine invite, Senior Bowl neither, is Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa. And you watch Christian Boyd's tape out of Northern Iowa, and he does look like the kid who's playing 8th grade football, but he's 100 pounds heavier than everyone else. Until he comes up against Mason McCormick, the Northern Iowa South Dakota State game. If you want to watch a game that wasn't on national television and enjoy it, go watch those two go at it, because Mason McCormick got the best of Christian Boyd throughout most of that game, and that's what sold me on both of them. And I think both have upside. Christian Boyd is probably, he might go late 3rd round, maybe he slips into day 3, but Braden Fisk would be my first guy after the big two, Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton. If you told me that he was there in the second round for the Giants, and they took him in the 40s. That guy is an animal. He has short arms. He said, "Look, I know I have short arms, but I had to figure out ways to win." And he is routinely shooting gaps and using his strength to win there.
I talked to him for about 8 minutes in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. What a great kid, too. Like, he just loves football. Oh, man, it's just fantastic to talk to.
You get the sense that he is all about football. And to your point, he feels very genuine. Dwayne Carter at Duke, I like his game a lot as a day two guy. And Michael Hall Jr. at Ohio State, I'll mention him. Undersized, but again, so incredibly twitched up. He's shooting gaps all day long and creating issues there. Now, if he gets too high, you can walk him off the field. But when he is low and put a little weight on him, I think he has a chance to be really good as a disruptive interior defensive tackle.
Yeah, Ryan, you could file this into your head, too. I was talking to Bill Rabinowitz, who covers Ohio State for the Columbus Dispatch, right? He's been covering them for a decade. And I asked him why Hall just wasn't as consistent this year, right? Because you figure he should be more productive based on his physical slow state. He said he was dealing with 2 shoulder injuries during the year that limited some of his production. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe why he wasn't as productive as some of his traits might dictate.
And that's even scarier that now that he weighs 285 or whatever he weighs, that he actually can be better and stronger at the point, because those are the things we don't know. And that's where things start to, when we see players drop, could be off-field stuff. Some of the things that you mentioned about players you know about that I didn't, or injury related, while some player gets higher than other players. And those are the things in the media that you're never, ever going to know about, because it doesn't make any sense for teams to release that information. But I appreciate you sharing that with me.
No worries. And again, burn is something I've heard from media people. I have not looked into that myself, so I would definitely check on that. But that is something I've kind of heard people talking about a little bit. Ryan, tell the folks where they can find all your stuff and everything else you're doing for CBS.
Yes. So CBS Sports HQ, we're doing all sorts of draft content there. And if you prefer the podcast, me and Rick Spielman, the former Vikings general manager, do With the First Pick 3 times a week now, because, draft season's upon us, John. So anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there, including we did the LSU and UNC recaps from On Scene last week, if you want to check those out.
Yeah, and we had Rick on during the season. He was fantastic. We'd been talking to him, trying to get him on too before the draft. He's awesome. You guys do a great job, Ryan. Thanks so much for the time. Enjoy the next 3 weeks, which is basically a sprint. And then you can take a little bit of a deep breath and get a little bit of time off before we start this all over again in training camp at end of July.
Amen. Thank you, John.
Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports. Thanks for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.